Hi guys, Electronic Underground here, and I just thought I'd do a video on dyspraxia and Aspergers syndrome because it's been implied that I might have it. I might have them actually. This was done by my local job centre. They said it's not an actual diagnosis, but they give me all the tests and said this is what it might be, so it's not. I just want to say firstly that I'm not an expert. I can't speak for other people because I don't know any other people really, but I think that I do have it, and I just want to share with you some of the difficulties that I've had throughout my life. I don't want to whine, make a whine video, but just sort of wondered if anybody else sort of identified with sort of what I've gone through. I suppose it started when I was at school. I noticed that there was something wrong. Didn't quite know what it was. I was very clumsy, awkward, not very sociable with people. I would prefer my own company. I was very creative and imaginative and quite clever. I just preferred, as I said, just to be on my own really, and PE was an absolute nightmare. Couldn't do that at all. I remember one instance at secondary school when I did go, because that's how bad it got. I couldn't hold the tennis racket right. I was called like a spastic, and I was made to feel humiliated. And I remember an actual fight breaking out, and this was sort of really hard for me to deal with personally. So yeah, and there were times when I'd have to actually catch the bus, and the bus was always jam-packed full of screaming kids, and just messing around. It was like hell on earth. I couldn't cope with being on that bus because it was just so damn noisy, and everybody just seemed to cope all right with it, like it was the normal thing to do. And I got a lot of looks off people because I couldn't handle it, and people doing a lot of juvenile things, and it was sort of difficult for me to deal with. And then sort of growing up, when I was about a teenager, I didn't want to go out and stuff, so that was quite difficult. Didn't have any friends. I still don't really. Well, I've got a few friends, but none. But I even find that quite difficult. So, and then I just sort of drifted through my first couple of jobs. Often I would find I couldn't take instruction very well. I couldn't work out what the company wanted, what they were asking of me. I didn't realise why. I just thought maybe I was stupid. I just sort of went with it, tried to feel the fear and get through it, because I'm sort of the type of guy who takes responsibilities for his actions. But I realise now that some of the actions that I've made were not entirely my fault. Some of them were, and some of them weren't. Sometimes it's like people say I don't listen. Well, I try to listen, I really do, but it's like I just wish that for 1 second they could have a look inside my head and realise how difficult it is for me. But as I said, I don't know why not. I just want you to know, how difficult it sort of is. I'm sure other people have sort of felt the same way. As I said, I worked for a supermarket for about 7 years, and I did quite well at that, customer service, which is strange. It's like I felt like I don't want to be sociable, I don't want to talk to people, yet I just did it. It's like I felt the fear and did it anyway. There were times when I'd have to work on the fish and cut up the fish, and I couldn't do that. That was something that was just too hard for me to do. I couldn't get the sequence no matter how hard I tried, and I'd often cut myself by accident and things. Stacking a shelf would be quite difficult for me to do because it's such a simple process, but someone says to me stack a shelf, and all of a sudden this mishmash of strategies and plans go into my head about how to stack a shelf, and they wanted it done a specific way. I did it, but they weren't happy, and the manager just arrogantly, instead of telling me to go and do it again, which is perhaps what he should have done, he sort of did it in front of me to show how, that's how you do it. And there was a time when I was working, I remember it was a Tuesday, and one of the managers come across, and he was quite an ebullient person, quite bullying, and I just cleaned down the pizza section. I was doing that, and he come up to me and says, "Why aren't these shelves being stacked?" And I was like, well, I will get to that. I do understand and hear what he's saying. And I looked down for a second, I looked up, and he said, "I'm here, mate." And he started going on about these shelves, going on and on and on. I said, "I will get to it," and I sort of raised my voice a bit. And he's like, "Don't you raise your voice to me," and all this, and I was getting peed off because he was a bit of a notorious for having a bit of a reputation anyway. So I actually said, well, come on then, you know, because that's how I was feeling at the time. That's how he made me feel. You know, I think I'd actually come in looking for a fight, maybe. I was a bit pissed off. And then this effeminate manager come down. He was a guy, but he was very sort of effeminate. I wouldn't say gay, because I'm not offending anybody. I hope I'm not offending anybody, but that's how it seemed to me. And he was like, Richard, get away from him, get away from him. And I was like, well, I'm nowhere near the guy. I'm not even there. And then they just walked away, and it was like confusing and humiliating. And people were like, well, why don't you complain? And I did sort of say something to my manager, and she was like, well, that's the way he wants things done. And I thought, well, that's not good enough, really. And I just sort of forgot about that, and just, you know, little things like that just really made me feel underconfident, and that was difficult. My last job was a support worker. That's my last proper job, and I couldn't do that because everything's got to be regimented, everything's got to be to the point. But the company was so confusing, their logic was so confusing, because you'd have to go around to service users' houses and support them to tidy up, so they'd actually have to do it. But the thing is, this one guy I was seeing, he wouldn't do it. He would not clean up. You'd show him and he just wouldn't bother. And there was one time they give me, like, I don't know, 2 hours notice that someone was coming, an inspection, and the guy was supposed to clean it up, and he wouldn't do it. I had literally no time because I had to go because my shift had ended. And I actually said to them, well, I'm not being funny, I totally respect the professionalism and things, but you cannot give me just that amount of time and expect me to do it because I've got to go. You know, and it just didn't seem to go down very well with the company. Everything had to be, again, regimented, and I was being blamed. And I was told I'm not to help people tidy up yet. I got told off for the place being untidy because he wouldn't clean. So I understand that, you know, they have difficulties and they need support. I'm all for that, but I just couldn't see the logic in that. So that was quite confusing. So I just, you know, I worked for 3 weeks last Christmas. Do you remember when it was really, really cold? I did 3 weeks over Christmas, and it was slippy, and I had to support the guy to go to Morrison's and stuff, and I got no training whatsoever, but I did the best that I could, but that wasn't good enough apparently. And I do admit, you know, there were things that I could have done better. You know, I'm not saying, oh, Aspergers and Dyspraxia, it's because I'd never do that. I'd take responsibility for the things that I could control, but things like the finance I just couldn't do. My last, well, I wouldn't even call it a job really. I went to work as a landscape gardener for my best friend, who I thought was my best friend, and it's a job which I do not recommend for anybody with what sort of I potentially have, because you have to have a lot of attention to detail, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't remember the names of the tools, I couldn't work out the sequence, I couldn't do any cobbling, and I got ripped to shreds for it. I got the mick taken at me all the time. So that was quite horrible, and I got the blame for it. You know, fair enough, I shouldn't have been there, but I just don't think there's any need for bullying in the workplace whatsoever. I mean, what does it achieve? I mean, I think with this guy it was like a power thing, you know. It's like, look at me, I've got a skill and I'm gonna do my best. You know, it wasn't just me, do it to others as well. Some guy actually offered him out with a shovel and was holding it like this, you know. I remember it reminds me of the Incredible Hulk, the trial of the Incredible Hulk at the beginning, where they push David Banner into the pit all the time and he's trying to get out, and he just grabs the shovel like that, you know, it threatens him, and that's what it reminded me of. So yeah, it's quite difficult really, but the things are not so bad, you know. I get on with things. I'm more accepting of what I might have, and I just wanted to know if anybody else has similar, you know, similar situations, similar experiences. I really invite you to share them with me, because I'm so inspired by some of the great videos that you guys do and things. So yeah, I mean, thank you very, very much for watching. I'm going to do perhaps a follow-up to this. I'm sorry if I've gone on for too long. If you like my video, please email and subscribe. You know, Electronic Underground. I'm going to do another electronic music review probably towards the end of the week. So thank you very, very much, and peace.